Hello, welcome to Cloud Native Live, where we dive into the code behind Cloud Native. I'm your host today. My name's Whitney Lee. I'm a CNCF ambassador and a developer advocate at VMware Tanzu. So every week, we bring new presenters to showcase how to work with cloud native technologies. We'll build things. Today, we will definitely break things, and we'll answer your questions. Today, we have a wonderful human and one of my very best friends, Victor Farsik. One of my best.
There we go. There we go.
Well, Victor's here to talk to us about diving into Kubernetes testing techniques with KUTTL. I think that's how you say that. KUTTL and Crossplane. So this is an official live stream of this. Is it official? That's how you say it, KUTTL?
I don't know. It's your stream. I'm a guest. How do I know how it's called?
Okay, I need to get through this stuff. This is an official live stream of the CNCF, and as such, it's subject to the CNCF Code of Conduct. So please don't add anything to the chat that would be in violation of that Code of Conduct. So basically, be kind and respectful to each other, to Victor, to me, to everyone, even your people who are just around in the room around you. Anyway, friends who are joining us live, please say hello in the chat. Tell us where you're viewing from. And as always, if you have any questions, go ahead during the presentation, go ahead and put those in chat. We want today's presentation to feel more like a conversation, so we'll answer your questions as we go today. And with that, I'll hand it over to Victor. Victor, tell us about you and about the presentation today.
About me? Yes, I'm Victor. And about the presentation, we were just discussing before this started, kind of like, hey, did you prepare something? No, I misunderstood the instructions. So the presentation is no slides, nothing. So what I really want to explore. So here's the story. Okay, let's be serious for a second. Stop smiling with me. What I thought to do is to figure out how to write tests for one of my projects. I have no tests over there, right? This is a version project. I do have a bunch of Kubernetes manifests. I did not practice. I did not prepare material. The idea is to figure it out, right? I know a couple of tools that we should use and things like that, but kind of completely unprepared, off the grid. Let's figure it out together type of approach.
I love it. It's off the grid. You didn't even have electricity up until 5 minutes before this presentation. So this is down and dirty.
Exactly.
So this sounds super fun. So we're using this tool that neither of us even know how to say it. It's let me put a link in the chat. KUTTL, right? And we're going to use that to write some tests. Okay. Is it time? Before we share your screen, so Victor and we host a show together. So why this stream feels especially silly? We really are very good friends. Actually, Victor, we have best friends bracelets. Oh, they're not coming into focus. Okay.
Somehow.
Well, yeah, there it is. Best friends. Okay, so we just did a KubeCon keynote together in China. We host a show together called You Choose on Victor's YouTube channel, DevOps Toolkits, where we do a choose your own adventure style journey through the CNCF landscape. So that's why today feels extra casual and silly, but we're going to do some very serious work here. It's going to be fun. And
serious and fun. Okay.
Yeah, they could be both things. We have tons of hellos in the chat. We have people here from New Delhi, from South Africa. That's so awesome. Thanks for coming. Are you ready to share a screen and kind of get into it?
Yes, sure. Yeah, go for it. You press the button, I guess, right? Or something like that. There we go, right? Mm-hmm. So let me do a quick intro, right? And Whitney or any of the guests in questions, interrupt at any moment. I like to be interrupted. And the main reason why I like to be interrupted is because I tend to interrupt everybody else. So otherwise it would be double standard, right? So the story is that I was a really freak about testing, right? Mm-hmm. The first book I wrote was Test-Driven Java Development or something like that, right? In the meantime, I moved into Kubernetes and all the good things that we are doing today. And the other day I had the need to refactor thousands of lines of YAML of my Kubernetes manifests to change it to something else, and that something else being from YAML to Q. And then I realized, or went back to my old golden days, that hey, if I'm going to refactor, if I'm going to rewrite everything, and expect the same result, I better start figuring out how I'm going to test that, right?
Yeah.
And it's almost unfortunate that testing is almost a norm. Everybody assumes that we are testing everything, but except when you come to Kubernetes, then actually we don't. Or at least it is very rare, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
So I looked for the tools, searched for the tools, and it turned out that according to my limited time spent in searching, there is only one tool that potentially can help with that, and that's KUTTL, one of those. KUTTL, right? So
Okay.
the idea is, yes, the idea is to, let me actually show you what I have here. So this is my crossplane compositions related to databases, everything to manage databases in Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, and what's not, right? And there's, let's see, there is vc.l, there is almost 900 lines of pure YAML that I want to convert into Q. And
Will you
before I
zoom
do
in,
that,
please?
second, of course I will. There we go.
Thank you.
More? Is that good?
That's probably fine. Anyone can speak up
Okay.
if it's not good for them.
Yeah. So the idea is I'm going to rewrite this to Q, and before I rewrite this to Q, I want to write tests that will confirm the current behavior. And then when I start rewriting that, I want to run those same tests and expect exactly the same output, right? The same result.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
So, as you know, I'm relatively new to Kubernetes, and you and I together have been working through all the CNCF tools, and I guess I want to know, why have I never heard about testing in Kubernetes before? I guess before now I assumed maybe it was just like more happening at the application level than.
Yes, because many of the things get started and propagated by application developers. We had years of struggle to convince all of us actually that we should write automated tests to do things that was happening 20 years ago. And very often in certain areas, and testing is certainly the case, the rest of professionals or experts or people tend to follow later. We are still, there are small percentage of us are testing infrastructure done by Terraform or other tools, but Kubernetes, very few. Not nobody, but it's not common.
So is it maybe just because Kubernetes has been changing so rapidly and it's just now becoming a mature technology? Is that related?
But,
just that it's young?
Changing something rapidly changing is additional reason to do testing.
Yeah.
Right? It's actually the argument in favor of testing, not an excuse for not doing testing, right?
Okay. So the answer is you don't know why it hasn't existed so much yet, and it definitely should.
No idea. Exactly. I don't know. I know a couple of projects in CNCF landscape that are using KUTTL, the one I'm going to use today. So it's not nobody. It's just not very common.
Okay. And then specifically what we're testing here is Kubernetes manifest?
Yes. So I want to test that couple of things, right? I want to test that manifests that I create are as they should be, right? But it goes further than that, right? Because very often, in this case, I'm using Crossplane, but I'm going to use Kubernetes deployment as an example, right? Because it might be easier to explain. You write the YAML that, or Helm or YTT or whatever you're using that will create that deployment. That's cool. You want to test it and say, is this deployment exactly as I want it to be. And that's the easy part. The
Mm-hmm.
hard part is that, yes, but that deployment will create a replica set, and that replica set will create pods, and those pods will create some volumes, right?
Yes.
So what you really want to test is not only the direct, this is what I wrote, that's easy, but you want to test, okay, so will my deployment create that replica set, right? And will that replica set be the exact specification I want? And will it create pods? And will those pods be what I want? And will those pods create volumes, and so on and so forth, right? So it's the complexity there. I mean, it's not really big complexity, but the challenge there is to figure out how to test not only what you write, but all the child resources and modifications that Kubernetes itself will make as a result of applying that something.
Okay, super cool.
Okay, yeah, go.
Let's just give lots of chatters happening in the chat, and I want to say hello to everyone. We have lots of people here. California, from Belgium, from London, from Chennai, from Bangalore, from Moldova, from India. Amazing, amazing, amazing. So thank you so much for saying hi and where you're from. We have an ominous thing that says KUTTL is good, but something better is coming. So
what is it? I want to know. Because we can discuss. I actually think that KUTTL is horrible. It's just... Yeah. So the thing I'm featuring today, I don't think it's exceptionally good. I just don't think that we have anything better. So if anybody knows of a better solution, I would be really grateful. And when I say KUTTL is horrible, I don't mean it's horrible, but the main problem with KUTTL, the one I'm going to use, is that the last release was almost a year ago.
Okay. Oh, so no one's
so
really...
it's kind of not really well maintained and all that stuff.
All right. Well, tell us what better is coming, please. We have Nuno says hello, our friend Nuno. And then we have more amazing, like hello from Chile, hello from Colombia, Argentina, Toronto, India, another Colombia. That's great. Italy. We have another India, France. Okay, I got to stop reading those, or we'll do that all day. But we have a question about KUTTL, which is, can we, and this is a question I had too, can we test Helm chart deployments with it? Is it going to work with all the different ways we can write application configuration? CDK?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So what we are really testing, or at least what I will try to do today, is I'm testing the result of what happens when I apply this to a Kubernetes cluster, right? And doesn't matter whether that something is generated with Helm or with pure YAML. In my case, with Q. Actually, I probably not have time to go into Q, but doesn't matter what it's generated from. I'm testing the result in Kubernetes cluster, right? And that means it can be anything.
Because all those tools in the end make the YAML, and the YAML is being tested.
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. And then to answer a question about what's better, they say Chainsaw is the tool that's coming that will help us test Kubernetes in the future.
Okay, Whitney, now you need to do a solo for a minute until I write it as a note to myself. Check Chainsaw.
Chainsaw. Do you have advice, Victor, about where one can learn more about testing? For one, you could just stay in the stream with us for a while. And And we're asking, did you miss an introduction to KUTTL? We haven't said too much about KUTTL. We talked about Kubernetes testing generally, how there isn't really a lot of Kubernetes testing tools out there. And then what we talked about was the trick was not just testing the configuration itself, but all of the child resources and grandchild resources and great-grandchild resources that get created from that.
Exactly.
Manifests. That's the challenge of Kubernetes testing.
Exactly. So I can explain KUTTL, or I can start writing the KUTTL stuff and explain while I'm doing it. What feels better?
Option 2 is what I choose, unless the chat speaks up and says.
Good, because I forget things so fast that I already forgot what's the option 1. But let's go for it. Option 2. Cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a cluster using kind, which is okay. This is not a good beginning. Oh, I know. I need to start Docker. This will take a second. By
Will
the
you
way,
zoom in
this
again,
is,
please?
of course. There we
you.
go. Yeah, as you already mentioned, I lost electricity. It came literally few minutes before the stream, so I did not start the stuff. Some more things might be failing than usual. Let's see. Docker container ls. It's working. Okay. Delete cluster. I'm going to delete what I did before and start from scratch. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to create a cluster, Kubernetes cluster with kind. The reason why I like kind is that it's fast to create, fast to destroy. I want to destroy everything I did after I'm finished, but everything I'm showing should work in any Kubernetes cluster, right? So it doesn't really matter.
While we're waiting on that, we have a question.
Yes, please.
It is, I'm new to KUTTL. It looks like an end-to-end testing approach, correct? Can I do integration testing with it?
Depends how you define integration. So you're testing really Kubernetes resources, right, in a cluster. So you can test it on any level as long as we understand that we are talking about testing the validity of resources, not necessarily what is running in your containers in that cluster is correct, right? So is the deployment correct? Does it create a replica set and things like that? Kubernetes resources from the perspective of, are they defined and created correctly, not necessarily what is running as your applications in that cluster.
Yep.
Okay, keep up the questions. I love that. I'm going to create a directory test. And this is cool because you see that I did not even have the directory test. This is really starting from scratch, right? And I'm going to create something called KUTTL test YAML. Now, this is the file that tells KUTTL what to do, what to execute, what to set up, and so on and so forth, right? So the first thing is API version. It's KUTTL.dev. I'm likely going to make mistakes, so bear with me. Beta 1. And kind is test suite. Cool. Now I'm going to say that test dirs are going to be, I'm going to store my tests in the directory, let's say tests, right? There we go. That's where I will keep my tests later, right? Once I start defining tests. And now I'm defining the setup and configuration and all this stuff. And this is now going to take a bit of time. Commands is, what are the commands? What do I want to execute as a setup before I start running tests, right? What are the prerequisites that my cluster should have to be ready to execute the tests? So since I'm running I want to test my Crossplane manifests, I'm going to install Crossplane, install, and Crossplane, and it's going to be Crossplane stable and Crossplane. This is the chart, and the namespace is going to be Crossplane system. And I want to create that namespace in the new cluster. And I want to wait until Crossplane is installed, right? So we're talking about setup. And the next one, I want to, since I'm testing some Crossplane compositions, I'm going to apply whatever is defined in file name providers.aws, right? So if you're not familiar, Crossplane has providers like, hey, this is how you manage AWS, this is how you manage Azure, Google, and I will need how to manage, since we are talking about composition for databases, how you create users in that database and so on and so forth. So I will need to install all those providers in that cluster, right? And that means, yes?
This is a good segue to a question and maybe a comment about questions generally. We're getting a lot of questions, but some of them aren't related to the matter at hand. And I think the ones that are not related, I'm going to save until the end. We'll do a more general Q&A just in the interest of moving this all along. But okay. One of the questions, which I think you're kind of answering now, is is, can I test resources that were created with Crossplane in Azure or AWS? So, Mike, I'm going to make that question more general. When you use any CNCF add-on tool to extend the Kubernetes API and make Kubernetes resources, can you use KUTTL to test any of that?
Yes, you can use test any type of resource in a Kubernetes cluster, no matter what it is. I'm using it to test Crossplane. You can use to test typical Kubernetes stuff like deployments, pods, what's or not. You can use it to test, let's say, policies with Kyverno, anything really. Anything that Kubernetes understands, you can test. Or at least I haven't found the limitation yet.
Yes. If anyone has, please do speak up. We want to hear about it. And it's worth maybe saying for those who aren't familiar with Crossplane, what Crossplane does is it takes any API on the planet and it makes it so you can interact with it as a Kubernetes resource. So when we're talking about Azure or AWS in this context, we're talking about bringing those resources into Kubernetes and interacting with them as though they're Kubernetes resources.
Exactly.
So and then how is testing with KUTTL different from something like Helm unit tests?
With Helm unit tests, I do not use exclusively Helm tests, and I'm not. I think that would be very useful, but Helm unit tests are more concerned about whether you defined Helm templates correctly. I'm more interested in this case whether what will be applied to my cluster is correct.
Excellent. And then Bernard, you're asking whether we can test Oracle Cloud Infrastructure resources. So if it's a Kubernetes, if it's defined in Kubernetes as a Kubernetes resource, we could test it. And if not, then we cannot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If it's defined in Kubernetes, the answer is yes to any type of testing of the resources themselves, not the processes running over there.
Excellent. All right, what have you been up to during this conversation?
So I've been setting up. I've been setting up things like, hey, I want to. Whenever I start testing, I want to install Crossplane. I want to apply some. I want to apply my composition itself, right? The first actually providers. I want to install Google, AWS provider, Google provider, Azure provider, SQL provider, and then my composition, right? That's what I'm really testing here. And then I started writing the commands to wait until they're all healthy. I probably can skip that part, and because there are quite a few others. And if I do skip, I think that I'm done with the configuration.
So
something will not work.
Of course.
Let me say that.
So is the idea to spin up a whole new kind cluster, install you everything you need, test your manifests, and then you can tear down that kind, and then you feel it's tested, and then now you can apply this to something else?
Almost. So what I prefer, since I have quite a heavy lifting over here, quite a lot of things needs to be installed in a cluster.
Yeah.
I prefer to create a cluster, install everything that needs to be installed, and then apply the things that I want to test, which I did not get to yet.
Okay.
Run tests and destroy those parts, but not the setup. I'm going to keep the setup. I'm going to destroy everything apart from the setup, but keep the setup so that I don't waste too much time.
Okay. I guess I'm surprised by how much is happening at the beginning. Like when you run these tests, how many commands are happening before the tests are actually run?
Yes, depends. I'm guessing that many people will have much simpler setup than I do. I'm just going crazy here.
I love it. Bring it on.
Exactly. And it failed as it was expected. Let me see what I did wrong. Okay, yes. KUTTL get. Let me see. Okay, so I did not set up to wait for things, and I'm just going to run tests again. It will eventually work once all those providers are up and running. Let me actually, while waiting, or you can come up with a question. Otherwise, I can check what I did wrong.
one question we got here is how would we use this tool in a CI/CD context?
Oh, you would run the same commands that I was that I'm running in a CI. So I'm executing now kubectl test and the directory tests, which actually is not needed because it's specified here. So you could run the same command from, let's say, GitHub Actions or whatever you're using, right?
Great question.
And I figured out that I forgot to install this. And now it should potentially work. Ta-da-da-da. Now it is installing stuff and it's not failing. And there we go. Now this will take probably a couple of minutes until everything. Actually, no. Yes.
We do have a question, a test-related question. Is the test coverage features user-friendly in KUTTL compared to TerraTest when testing with Kubernetes?
I haven't used TerraTest, so I don't know. Another thing for me to write down and figure out.
Excellent. If anyone does have experience and wants to speak up, we're all ears.
Tests. So let me start by defining. So now I'm switching to tests themselves, right? I'm going to define the first set of tests and the setup specific for that test, right? And so I created the directory Google. I'm going to test my Google manifest. And now the important thing is that KUTTL works by convention. It will always execute things that are named 00, and then 01, and then 02, and then 03. So it goes sequential based on the prefix of a file, let's say, right? And the file names can be two types. It can be assert.yaml or anything else. And if it's anything else, anything but assert, it will assume that that's a setup for that specific test, right? And I'm going to say, okay, let me install first something specific for that test. That something will be deleted at the end of the test. And that something is, I'm going to create my Crossplane claim. And for that, I need API version. First, I'm going to create a secret, v1. Okay, no. Kind is going to be secret. And metadata is going to be, let's call it my DB password. And data is going to be, oh my, echo dash n, my password. And then I'm going to base 64 to encode it. That is going to be my fancy password. And so here we go. Password autocomplete is messing with me. There we go, right? And one more thing, and I'm done. I'm going to say API version is going to be DevOps Toolkit series.com v1 alpha 1. I said v1 alpha 1. There we go. So I'm defining now my Crossplane claim, SQL claim. This is what I want to create in my cluster. Metadata is going to be called DB. That sounds good. Spec. I like autocomplete. It makes it look like I know what I'm doing. There we go. My DB and composition selector. If I remember correctly, provider is going to be Google official, and DB is going to be PostgreSQL. You can probably imagine that I spent a lot of time with those things, so I know it by heart. Yes.
For those who haven't used Crossplane, this is a custom resource, like a custom way to extend the Kubernetes API that Victor's created using Crossplane so that he can manage a database, a Google Cloud database that's completely external to Kubernetes as a Kubernetes resource. And so that's what,
Exactly.
yeah. So you've already
Sorry,
written the Kubernetes, the Crossplane resource to do that, and you're referencing it here.
Exactly. I already have those things. Those things are working. I just want to test it so that when I start refactoring at some later date, it all works. So now, yes, I sensed a question there.
In response to the Terra test, how's this test coverage compared to Terra test? They say KUTTL uses YAML, which is easier to be used instead of Terra test, which uses Go. So that's one difference right there.
Okay, automated test for your infrastructure code. Test is. I haven't used it. It sounded so much like Terraform that I didn't consider it.
Yeah.
I'll try it out. So I don't know, to be honest. Test infrastructure code with Terra testing for. Terra test seems to be very much for Terraform when you're looking something very specific to Kubernetes. Oh, I see here Packer. Oh, there is. Sorry, you cannot see on the screen, but I'm looking at it. Yes, I'm going to try it out. But the answer is right now, I don't know.
Excellent. Yeah. Nothing. That's all for. We have another question. If KUTTL can help me understand if there are memory leaks in my Kubernetes deployment.
No, it tests the Kubernetes resources. It doesn't test what is running in your containers. So it's not replacing your, let's say, testing of your applications, right? Functional testing, integration testing, whatever. So it's not replacing your tests. It is just focused on confirming that what you want it to have, what you want to have in Kubernetes cluster is what it is, right? From Kubernetes perspective, not from the perspective of what is in your containers, if that makes sense. Does it? Maybe?
It makes sense to me. Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm doing right now is that I created assert. So this is what will be confirmed when I execute kubectl. It will check whether whatever I define in this file really exists in my cluster, right? And whether it has specific properties. So everything that I define in this file will have to exist and be exactly as I specified, right? So there will have to be this API version, this kind, not kinds, and metadata will have to be MyDB, right? This is what I specified. This is what I'm tell it to create, and this is what I will test whether it's really like that in my cluster. And some of the things will be the same. So spec, some of things will be different. Like for example, here, I'm not specifying composition reference, whatever that is, right? But since I know that Crossplane, when it creates resources, it adds additional things that are very important. I want to confirm that that is really happening. So, for example, composition ref should be name Google official PostgreSQL, right? I know that Kubernetes Crossplane will add this. I expect them to add this to the resource when it gets created in a cluster. And this should be the ID. And composition selector is another thing that is not something I'm specifying, but I know that it has to be there. And it will be this one. And parameters are going to be the same as here, which means version 13 and small, right? So I want to confirm that when I apply those two, this is what I will get in my cluster. Make sense?
Makes sense to me.
Okay, so I'm going to run it again. And it will go through the setup again. This will be fast because everything is already up and running. Then it will execute this install here, right? And now it is testing whether what was created in a cluster is what I specified in 00 assert. And most likely it's not, because I know it's not, because you see how it is waiting here. It is hoping that maybe that something will be created soon. And I can show that SQL claims that you can see that it create the
KUTTL?
the setup. Yeah, the KUTTL created this SQL claim in this namespace, mydb, but there is something different between what I specified that I want and what it really is. And after the timeout, here, let me see, the timeout I put to 60. I'm going to reduce it for the future to be 30 seconds, not to wait that much. After a certain amount of time, it gave up, right? And said, hey, I couldn't find what you're looking for. And here in the output, you can see this is what it found in a cluster, right? It did find some SQL claim. And there are some fields that exist in the cluster, and I did not specify in my assert. And that's okay, because you don't have to specify every single detail, right? What does matter is that what you do specify, that exists. And you can distinguish those by the minus. And here's a minus, and says, okay, look at this. You expected to find this.
And here it is.
And in reality, what I found is this. Right? I made a typo there, right? That was my mistake. But basically,
you can pretend you did it on purpose as a teaching moment.
Exactly, right?
I believe
you expected this. This is what you got. There's something wrong. And if I now run again tests, it should execute much faster. And SQL claim, it is already deleting the namespace. So it is shutting down everything that I created. And it passed. Now it works.
Cool.
Right? Any questions before I move on?
I missed how you got to the place where you could find what went wrong with the test, where it hung instead of passing.
I knew because it was waiting here for a while.
So it hung.
Was waiting. So it said here, you see, this is what I saw. This was the last line, and it was hanging there. It was hanging for 60 seconds because because in Kubernetes, there is no guarantee that the fact that something doesn't exist this very moment, that it will not be created while later, right? So it needs to give it a try, right? And after the timeout, it gave up and said, okay, this test failed. This is the output.
Okay, that's the output after a timeout.
Go figure it out.
Cool. We have lots of questions.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, this is great. I've really enjoyed. So can I answer this one? You can double check my work.
I don't see the question, so I don't even know what you're answering, but that's fine. Because I'm looking at my monitor.
Oh, okay. So you can't see our stream right now. So the question is, what's the benefit of having external APIs proxied by Crossplane and exposed as Kubernetes resources? Well, so there are three big benefits of this. One is when you bring it into Kubernetes, you can now use the Kubernetes control loop to watch the desired state or the actual state and make sure it's always in sync with your desired state. So you have synchronization and drift detection. Number two is that you could use it with any other tool in the Kubernetes ecosystem. So we could have policies that now are Kubernetes policies that you can apply to your external resources. You can do GitOps now. You can define your desired state in Git. Use a tool like Argo CD or Flux to sync that to, you define it in Git using Crossplane resources. Sync that to your cluster with Argo CD or Flux, and then Crossplane will do the work of syncing your external resource. So now you can use GitOps for your external resources. And Victor's so sure I have this covered. He's just like thinking ahead.
I'm already working on the next one. Exactly. I have full confidence.
And then the third reason is that with Crossplane, you can offer a simplified claim. So you can have an expert configure what you want your Google Cloud database, for example, example, to be configured like at your organization. And then the people who need to provision that database, who need to consume it, can have a very simplified interface and only see the knobs that they need to see to be able to make those change, to be able to provision that database or whatever external resource that you have. So that's the answer.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. Great. And so now back to KUTTL, does this support cluster updates?
If you want to check whether your resources after the update keep being defined correctly and they are present and they did not disappear and things like that, yes.
Cool. I think this person is requesting examples of Kubernetes resource that KUTTL can test, but really, as far as we know, any resource in Kubernetes that's defined as a Kubernetes resource can be tested here.
I'm testing resources that are not even baked into Kubernetes. So this SQL claim that I'm testing here, this does not exist in Kubernetes. This was brought in by Crossplane in this case, but it can be anything really.
And the next question, can KUTTL check the state of resources? Check if it's in a ready state.
Yes. So I'm going to mock a bit here, right? But I could say status, right? Because status, and then I don't remember exactly. I could have did this. This was now autocomplete, right? But state bond, whatever, right? So yes, you could check statuses. You can check anything that is available in a resource. That includes specification, metadata, state, or anything else that might be there. Yes.
Cool.
Big yes.
Another question, can it test if security context is applied to a pod?
Yes. That's also part of the definition of a pod. You could, whatever security context colon is this or that. Yes.
Yes. I like saying yes. Great.
Yeah.
And we're caught up on questions. We do have some other questions that were asked at the beginning about just how to learn Kubernetes, and we're saving those for the end and staying on task for now.
Yeah. As you choose. I'm following your lead.
I'm trying to stick with stuff that's related to this stream in particular and see what kind of time we have at the end.
So, like before I said, I'm creating something called SQL claim, right? And I'm testing that SQL claim is indeed in a cluster with all the properties, right? But then there is that concept in Kubernetes that one resource might create another resource, which might create another resource, and so on and so forth. Like deployment creates a replica set. In this case, SQL, in my case, I expect it not only to exist, but it will create something called SQL claim. Not only that it exists, but it will create something called SQL without claim, right? And I expect it to have some specification. So this is a child resource. This is not something that I'm telling Kubernetes to create, but it will create as a result of creating something else. And let's say claim ref should be API version, for example. I know that by heart. And kind should be SQL claim, and name should be my DB, right? So I expect this SQL claim to create inside of the cluster this one. I do not need to tell Kubernetes explicitly that should be created, but that's what will happen. And now I want to test that is really happening, right? So I wrote another assert. This is now 01 assert.yaml. Execute tests again. And then if everything goes well, it will, if it starts immediately deleting namespace, that means that it immediately confirmed, found it, and it passed, right?
Excellent.
And let's say that it should have been XXX, just to say something, right?
Just to get it wrong.
Exactly. Now it will wait for 30 seconds, hoping that it will somehow automatically appear, and 30 seconds later, you will see that it failed, and you will see the diff, plus and minuses.
During this 30 seconds, let's go with a question. Are there any options of storing the test results for future reference and get some tabular output if we have many tests?
Probably. The reason why I'm saying probably is because I never tried it myself. I'm very much into test-driven development, meaning that if it fails, I'm fixing it right away. I'm not trying to find how to store it, but we're going to check it together right now. But before I do that, you see how now it found, okay, here it is, right? This is what you said you want, and this is what you got. Now, first of all, you can store this output somewhere, right? You can do just t and then somewhere dot txt, right? But I suspect that KUTTL has other outputs, and we're going to check it. Let's start artifacts dir config config planes here the dir, or maybe it doesn't. Report, specify JSON or XML for report.
There you
Report
go.
location determine. There we go. And there is report name as well. So JSON or XML. Those are your options.
Cool. I like watching you problem solve. It helps me learn. No other questions right now that are related. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. How much time we have? I can continue writing tests until the end of time. Or
if we're at a good stopping point, I will go ahead and revisit those first questions. We have about 14 minutes left in the stream.
Yeah, because the rest now would be, imagine that I'm not on the stream now. I would just continue creating tests. I would probably need 100 tests, give or take, which might be boring to look at me do all 100 of those.
Let's all do this marathon together. How is KUTTL different from Kubernetes linters like kubelint or Datree?
Very different. So linting in general, without going into specific tool, is checking whether the syntax of what you're defining is correct. So, for example, there is no such thing as my kind, right? My kind. This does not exist in Kubernetes, right? So linting would tell you, hey, you cannot define something called my kind. And also, linting would typically go through the schema for that resource. So it would go to Kubernetes cluster, find the schema for SQL. And if I would say Victor is cool, then it would say, yeah, no. Victor, exactly. First of all, by definition, by default, it would not even need to check the schema for that. But apart from that, it would go to the schema and say, no, you cannot, there is no such thing as, in the schema, there is no such thing as spec claim ref Victor. Such a thing does not exist. Now, that's that's different from testing, right? It would say, linting would say cool is okay, right? Kind of like Victor, if Victor field exists, it is allowed to put any text into it. Now, this type of testing is, no. Did you really want to have cool here or not cool, which is more likely, right? And there was a second question, linting and Datree. First of all, Datree is bust, unfortunately, because I like the project, but bust. It's no more.
Okay.
Yeah, the company behind Datree unfortunately stopped any development. So it might not be a good thing to use. And I like Datree, by the way. So Datree is looking more for not testing whether whether you're getting what you want, but it is testing more for best practices, right? Oh, you did not, you forgot to specify the requested amount of resources and limits of those resources, right? It's a best practice for you to specify that, right? So it will tell you that, or it will, so please specify amount of memory that your application should use. That's a best practice that will tell you. Now, testing, on the other hand, like this, you would specify, no, the pod created through deployment should have specified in this condition 1 gigabyte of memory, right? That's kind of confirming that what you want is what you get. Datree would not tell you that, oh, it should be 2 gigabytes of memory, right? Because it doesn't know what you want, but it does know what is the best practice and what is not.
I have a comments that I want to verify what I think is happening, and I want you to make sure. So you shouldn't, with a tool like KUTTL, need to say this field exists, like because not if it's a key. If it's a value, yes, but not if it's a key. Because if it's a key, that should be caught as part of your custom when you define a custom resource, you're giving it a schema. And then that when you actually create a custom resource, it's being compared against that schema by an admission controller, correct? And so that should be
Exactly.
caught already by that Kubernetes process. And so the thing
Yes.
you're
So
using, yeah.
let's say that I remove metadata name, right? It is mandatory to have a name, as far as I know, right? Now, if I run the test again, no, not those are not tests. There we go, right? After 30 seconds, it will show you different messages as before. It will not show you this is the difference. It will tell you, I could not even find the SQL claim, right? There is no such thing as SQL claim. Somewhere in the logs that should say deleting namespace, failed in step. Let
Fail.
me try to find creating namespace. You see, I did not experience that myself. I never failed in this way. It should say somewhere. Anyway, it's somewhere. It says, here we go. Resource name may not be empty. Right, and this is now not this. This is the response that it got directly from Kubernetes cluster, because Kubernetes, when I tried to apply this, Kubernetes said, no. Stop, Victor.
Yeah.
Don't be a fool. You're not allowed to do this.
That came from a Kubernetes admission controller, not from
Exactly.
KUTTL.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And KUTTL is just passing it through to me, right?
And so let's get at these older questions that don't have to do with Crossplane or KUTTL. And they're both very similar, and they have to do with advice around what's the best setup to learn Kubernetes. So one is wondering if it's GCP or AWS. The other one thinks maybe it's an Ubuntu laptop, or can you use Windows? Those are the two questions that I was saving for later. And those in chat, interested in your opinion too.
Yeah, so you can run it locally. I tend to use either kind, like I'm doing today, which is running on top of Docker, or
KIND. The acronym KIND stands for Kubernetes in Docker, and
Exactly.
basically every node is really a Docker container.
Exactly. If I do Docker container ls, you will see that there is one container running, and that's the container created by kind. And basically, my whole Kubernetes cluster is in a container. Now, I could go to Docker, and let me find where is the preferences settings, right? I could go to Docker and just enable Kubernetes. I don't think I can enlarge this. Oh, no, I can. There we go.
Nice.
I could enable Kubernetes, and then I wouldn't need to use kind. I like kind because it allows me to create and destroy Kubernetes and start over whenever I want it, right? I don't like to keep random things floating around. And if I would enable it in Docker, then I would need to go and press the button. And I'm lazy. I don't want to press a button. So I use kind. And apart from that, my favorite for local is Rancher Desktop. But again, anything, Minikube would work, and many others. And going now, there were a couple of questions. One was Windows. What I was answering was for Mac and Linux. For Mac. For Linux, you don't even need Docker. You can run kind directly in Linux because you need Docker. You don't need Docker desktop. You don't need Docker client only. And for Windows, I don't know because I don't use Windows, but as far as I know, Docker runs there and it should work fine. Docker runs the desktop as well. And then if it's remote and you're looking for something easy among the big three, Google Cloud, Google Azure, and AWS, personally, I think that Google is easiest, GKE. But if you want to run remote for the sake of trying out things and kind of getting a feel of something closer to a real cluster, I think the Civo is great. I would recommend Civo because it's very, very cheap and very fast.
Civo.
CIVO.
Mm-hmm. And when we're talking about like Windows, Mac, Linux, we're talking about like your laptop's operating system. You're still
Yes.
ending up running Linux machines when you run nodes, correct?
Probably. I
Probably.
think, I'm not sure. I think that Docker running on Windows might be enabled to run Windows containers as well, but I'm not
It's
sure.
Yeah. So the when you're talking about learning Kubernetes, Kubernetes is existing across multiple different computers. And if you're doing a local cluster on your laptop, you're finding a way to simulate the fact that there are lots of little computers working together that are
Yes.
interfacing as one thing. And if those little computers, if your laptop has Windows, that's one thing, that's fine. But if the little computers you're manipulating as Kubernetes are Windows, it's my understanding that that's adding a level of complexity that you probably don't want to add as a beginner.
Yes, not as a beginner, just forget about Windows containers.
Don't do
That
it.
I would suggest going to that later. Kind of that would be
Mm-hmm.
additional skill to learn because all the lessons in Kubernetes are most of them are equally valid for Linux nodes and Windows nodes. So don't complicate your life with Windows right away.
Yeah.
And even if you're running Windows on your laptop, uh, Docker by default, if I'm not mistaken, will be running Linux containers on that laptop.
Yes. Excellent. Those are, and now we hit the bottom as far as questions go. So if anyone has any questions, please do speak up. Otherwise, unless Victor, there's anything else you want to demo, it might be time to say goodbye.
Yeah, I mean now now I have like 4 hours spending in front of me after this to write all the tests I wanted to write. That's it. And
For-
the part I didn't show here because I did not want to go too far away from the topic is to write also a lot of Q code that will replace
Ah,
my YAML.
yes. And so Q stands for configuration,
Configure,
unify,
unify,
execute.
execute. I think yes,
Yeah.
yes. It's a
And so,
language that is a mixture of, let's say, uh, Go and JSON. So if you mix those together and they have a baby, that will be Q. And it's very, very good for it. Actually, it's not the easiest one to wrap your head around on like the first hour, but once you figure it out, it's my preferable way to define stuff.
well, this has been an absolute joy, Victor. Thank you for being on the show. I hope we can do this more often. Come on, Cloud Native Live
Hey,
regularly,
if you're
please.
telling me that I have to do a show without preparing anything in advance, I can do it every week if you want. Kind of like,
I'm
this is a
in.
dream for me.
So, those of you who don't know, these Cloud Native Live shows, specifically, we ask our guests not to do slides, and we want these hands-on demos. We want it to break. We want to learn together and have a conversation, and so that's also very much Victor's style of presenting. So, it's a match made in heaven. Let's do this all the time.
Yeah.
All right, so that's it. Thank you so much, Victor. Let me put this away. I do have an ending script to read. Thank you so much for your time and attention to everyone who's here in the chat. It's been a wonderful chat today. Thank you, Victor, for sharing your expertise with us. And here we go. Let me find. Sorry. So thanks for joining today. It's great to have Victor Farsick here teaching us how to dive into Kubernetes testing techniques with KUTTL and Crossplane. The chat was amazing. Thanks everyone who watches the recording. Here at Cloud Native Live, we bring you the latest in Cloud Native code on Wednesdays and sometimes Tuesdays, always at the same time, which is noon Eastern. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next week. Bye.